What is up, my lads, and welcome to Age of Enlightenment's second developer diary. For this video I will be demonstrating the execution of a military campaign against Sweden, and as I am progressing I will also be explaining certain of the mechanics that have been implemented so far, so let's get started. The premise is that the Great Northern War has just started, meaning that me and my allies of Poland and Denmark are fighting together against the Swedish Empire. But before getting started, let me look out to my forces and my current military strength. Historically, around that time, not only was the Russian military depleted after a lengthy war against the Ottoman Empire, but there had also been a political crisis involving the Streltsy, who rebelled against the authority of Peter Tsar, and thus he disbanded them. Therefore, at this point in time I only have around 22,000 troops. But the truth is that I also wanted to demonstrate recruitment a little bit. Anyways, let me park my army here in Moscow, alrighty, and let me recruit a few regiments. I think that 8,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry will do just fine. And I have also temporarily turned on global recruitment, meaning that troops will be recruited not just from Moscow, but from all over my provinces, with Moscow serving as the rally point. As my force is being recruited, I should probably explain a couple of things about recruitment. First of all, you may have noticed that as I was pressing the recruit button, I did not really spend any money, at least immediately. This is intentional, because the prices of recruitment are variable and subject to the state of the market economy, and the market access to these goods is also not guaranteed. Let's take a musket regiment, for example. In order for a full regiment to be raised and equipped, one would need firearms, ammunition, clothing, food and alcohol. And the province that is tasked with the recruitment of that regiment places buy orders for these goods and must acquire them in order for the regiment to be functional. These goods are then placed into the regiment's inventory and used in the appropriate way. For example, things like food or alcohol are consumed on a daily basis, and whereas food is absolutely crucial, and in the absence of it a regiment can starve and completely disintegrate, alcohol is more of an optional resource that boosts morale. And of course you have ammunition, which only gets consumed during battles, and firearms and clothing, which do not really ever get consumed and only get gradually lost due to wear and tear or due to hardware casualties during battles. But how does the province acquire these materials? To simplify this demonstration, let's just focus on firearms for the time being. Say a certain amount of muskets is needed by the province for recruitment purposes, and there is no state stockpile in order to directly fulfill this order. In that case, the province only really has two options: either to produce those muskets, either through artisans working independently or through craftsmen working at factories, or to cover the deficit through imports via merchants. Of course, who exactly gets to fulfill the order isn't terribly important, because the main priority here is to raise the regiment as quickly as possible. But with that order of, let's say, 1,000 firearms in motion, now you have merchant and producer pops essentially competing with each other on who gets to satisfy the demand first. Merchants can really trade with whatever suits them best. It could be a neighboring province or it could be a foreign country, it doesn't really matter. As long as they can acquire those muskets for cheap and sell them at a good profit margin locally. But obviously, trading with nearby targets reduces transit costs and trading domestically spares them from tariffs. And if possible, merchants will use their capital in order to buy the merchandise, and then they will use their merchant caravans or merchant fleets in order to transport these goods to the buyers. However, let's say that for whatever reason merchants cannot fulfill this order. Let's just say that they cannot simply find a profitable route. In that case, it is really up to the producers to create these firearms. Muskets belong in the category of finished goods, meaning that they are a product of other raw or intermediate materials. In our case, we need refined ironwork and refined woodwork in order to construct firearms. So if we were to assume that this order is currently being processed by an artisan pop, the artisans, in order to cover the state's demand for muskets, now themselves create a demand for refined iron and refined wood. And of course, just as it was the case with the previous state order, this order of the artisans can be satisfied either by merchant pops or fellow producers. Let's say that again, for whatever reason, merchants cannot get their hands into either of those two goods. Since both of these goods are intermediate goods, this means that again, artisans or factory workers can satisfy this demand by producing them. Refined iron requires raw iron and a source of fuel, such as coal, in order to be smelted, and refined wood just requires plain old wood. And yet again, more demand is created for these three resources, which can again be satisfied by merchants or by local producers if they exist. In this case, we are talking about raw materials, so the producers would be laborers instead of artisans or factory workers. Once all of these orders and interactions between merchants and producers are resolved, the province stockpiles these goods until the regiment is ready to be deployed. If by any chance this sounds complicated or confusing to you, you don't really have to worry about this, since these calculations mostly happen in the background of the game and are part of the autonomous economic macroenvironment of the game, meaning that the player doesn't really have to micromanage any of this. Of course, you can still influence your economy and the way that trade takes place through taxes, tariffs and policies. Anyways, as I am waiting for those recruits to arrive, I will also assign my fleet from Arkhangelsk to get going to the Baltic Sea, as I will probably be needing them very soon. So the month is now May, the snows have also melted, which is nice, and my force is more or less ready, and it's almost 40,000 troops, with a respectable component of cavalry and artillery. The army is currently led by the faction leader Peter the Great, who is not particularly a great general, but he is not terrible either, and the fact that he is the king, the Tsar of Russia, also gives the troops an extra morale bonus since they are led by their leader. If I wanted to, I could recruit a new leader to replace Peter, but my regiments are composed of entirely conscripts who have zero experience. In this game, generals are recruited directly from the regiments. So if I was to recruit a general from inexperienced regiments sitting on zero experience points, I would be getting nothing but trashy generals, so there is no reason to do that. Accompanying my army is the army of the Cossack Hetmanate, which is my vassal right here, from which I assumed military control. Assuming military control kind of damages relations with your vassals, but the Swedes are pretty strong, so we will probably need them. And now, with my army numbering almost 60,000, I should probably pick a target and begin my military campaign. And I think that I will be beginning with the cities of Nien and Noteborg, because getting them is going to interrupt the land connection that Sweden enjoys with its Baltic possessions. So let's get to it. There are all sorts of ways to capture a province, with the simplest one being to just attack the province and wait until your force defeats the enemy garrison. However, there is also the option to simply starve out a settlement, which I will be demonstrating shortly. But before getting into that, I would like to ask you, what exactly forces me to wage war here at the borders? What prevents me from simply taking my force and marching all the way to mainland Sweden? Well, the answer is a supply. The game features a supply system, so if I got this army right here and I tried to bypass Nien and attack Finland directly, maybe march into Viborg, well, by clicking the supply button right here, I can actually visualize what's happening. Basically, the garrison of Nien is pretty much continuously launching sorties against my supply train, and with my army no longer having a direct line of communication with its base in Novgorod, starvation is only a matter of a few weeks at this point. The economics of resupply are very similar to the economics of recruitment, with essentially the producers and the merchants of Novgorod continuously trying to supply the armies that depend on it with whatever they may need. A way to slightly delay the starvation of an army whose supply line is compromised is to change its raiding stance. Armies have certain stances which determine their behavior, and the raiding stance represents how violent an army is with the locals, how much they steal from them, and the level of atrocities that they inflict on the locals. For raiding, you can go all the way from completely forbidding the army from harming the locals in any way whatsoever, to all the way to very brutal treatment of the local population. Of course, what you choose depends on your political situation and of course pragmatism. For example, if you plan to reintegrate a province towards your empire, maybe you will not want to harm the locals too much. After all, they will be your future taxpayers. However, if you are having supply problems or you are having trouble funding your war effort, you may be tempted to get a little bit more brutal on your civilian targets. In this case, I will only moderately increase it, and if I unpause for a bit, you will probably see the starvation deadline of my army increase? Let's see. Yeah, it only increased by a couple of days. Of course, foraging is a very temporary solution for supply problems, because eventually the countryside gets depleted and pretty much everything that there is to raid or pillage gets taken, so there is nothing left. A more reliable way, however, to attack deep into enemy territory without worrying about compromised supply lines is to leave a force behind to besiege the settlement that you are trying to bypass. In this case, I will be demonstrating to you taking a settlement by starving them out. So I will reduce the assault stance to 0, which represents how many direct assaults my army will be initiating against the enemy garrison, and I will also reduce the bombardment to 0. Bombardment is another good way to get provinces to surrender without resorting to costly assaults, and historically I believe that Napoleon managed to get the garrison of Madrid to surrender without a fight just by threatening to sell the city, which utterly terrified the defenders, who could have actually considered resisting under different circumstances. However, the problem with bombardment is obviously that it destroys the local infrastructure, which I do not want, especially for Nien, seeing that it will be the seat of the eventual city of St. Petersburg, but also because it can be really expensive. I mean, just imagine 10 battalions of artillery just non-stop bombarding day after day. I mean, I'm not doing too bad economically, but it's just something that I do not want, especially for a city that I plan to integrate. So with all that being said, let's just go and besiege Nien. And as you can see, the supply line is now uninterrupted, meaning that this army could continue attacking other Finnish provinces if I wished to. However, I don't really want to. I just wanted to show you how the supply lines work, so for the time being I will just send these guys to storm Noteborg the old-fashioned way. As you can see, whereas this army is just trying to starve them out, they aren't really losing any troops. However, the Cossacks are attacking Noteborg the old-fashioned way, so they are experiencing some attrition to the local garrison. Another thing to keep in mind is that Nien is a port city, so having my fleet nearby to blockade them is actually necessary in order to ever get them to starve out. If I didn't have this fleet around, then they would obviously be able to resupply via its port. Currently, I do not really have any representation of the fact that this is a port, other than the common sense of it being a coastal province, and Noteborg just fell. But in the future I will probably add some sort of a port model, or at the very least a UI element, in order to be more clear about this. And obviously, as you can probably figure out, many of these things that you are seeing right now are just placeholder assets and are subject to change in the nearby future. For the time being, just having some simple graphics to represent the cities and the troops that are moving around is enough for me. But yeah, the month is now September, and seeing that Nien will probably need a little bit of an extra investment before it starves out, I will take the chance and also storm Ivangorod. At the current iteration of the game, battles are resolved more or less instantaneously, with the occasional rare occurrence of a battle lasting for two in-game days. So having my army all the way there is actually quite a bit risky, because it could be an opportunity for the Swedes to defeat me in detail and not allow my armies the chance to reinforce one another. However, it is risk and reward, and in exchange for this risk, you are obviously getting more things done within a limited time frame. So Ivangorod has also fallen. I think that I saw an error at the battle panel there, but I am not sure. Maybe I will look into it later on. But yeah, for the time being, I will also wait for this army to get finished with the siege of Nien. And yeah, nice. So yeah, now I have control of the province of Ingria, and this means that the Baltics of Sweden can now only get supplied via sea. Not that this will be a horrible problem for Sweden, however, after all, they are quite the naval power. Part of the reason why I was even able to do this blockade is because I have disabled the Swedish fleet via script, just so that I could demonstrate how a blockade goes on. But if this wasn't a demonstration, and if the Swedish fleet somehow got out again, I would just have my fleet chill here on Lake Ladoga, which I can do since the Neva River is navigable. And for as long as I hold the Nien and Noteborg provinces, the Swedes cannot really pass through this river. Anyways, now that the month is November, I will probably have my troops chill out here in Ingria for a few months until the winter is gone, so that I can then continue with my offensive against the Baltics. It's February already, snows are slowly melting, nice. And yeah, that should be about fine. A thing worth noting out before I proceed with my attack is the type of control that I have over the province of Ingria. And it is pretty much just a mere occupation represented by these green stripes. This is a weak form of control that essentially means that I do not really get much out of these provinces. I do not really get paid any tax. I cannot construct buildings. I cannot recruit regiments. And for short-term wars or for provinces that you do not really care about, it is fine. But the Great Northern War was a conflict that lasted for 21 years. And the province of Ingria is fairly important to me. So a thing you can do actually in cases such as these is to use integration edicts. Integration edicts are essentially a form of unilateral annexation of a province. Essentially, I am annexing these provinces without any form of consent from Sweden whatsoever. No peace deal, nothing. I just annex them. It obviously has certain diplomatic repercussions. It makes you look more aggressive, it makes your enemies hate you more, etc. But it also allows you, on the bright side, to immediately begin governing these provinces as if they were yours. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's just get into the Baltics. And since I am no longer interested in starving any city out, I can just restore these values to their default setting. Again, I do not have to worry about Narva sabotaging my supply lines because I have the Cossacks guarding my rear. Jarva has fallen, very nice. The Cossacks just got Narva. So, just as I was done besieging Korb, the Swedes just got my Cossacks here on the outskirts of Dorpat. It was quite a hefty defeat actually. Like damn, I almost lost 10,000 troops out of that. And to make things worse, the Swedes barely lost anything at all. Not that this is terribly surprising. The Swedes do have an absolute advantage when it comes to quality. That being said, the Swedish army may have still gotten disorganized and demoralized, so I should probably immediately do something about it. My Cossacks are, for the time being, retreating all the way to Moscow. So be it, I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, let me try to get these Swedes. And yeah, I got fucked. So I should pause out for a second here and damn, let's appreciate the sheer scale of this disaster. So I still actually got pretty much 50% of the Swedish army there. And the real defeat of the Swedish army here isn't just the troops, it is also the fact that they lost veterans here. So even if it takes me a few months or even a year to restore my force, and the Swedes use this as an opportunity to replenish, well, they will be replenishing with recruits who will bring down the quality of the overall army on average. Meanwhile, my army was garbage to begin with. If anything, this defeat actually got my troops a little bit of experience. So yeah, for me it's just a matter of time and money needed to replenish my force and to continue depleting the Swedish strength. But yeah, with that being said, I think that despite the underwhelming ending, which quite frankly I did not expect, I actually expected to win that battle, but I guess I rolled a particularly bad dice roll in addition to having the disadvantage in quality. But yeah, nonetheless, I think that I managed to cover some of the most important things that I wanted to share with you guys for this dev diary. There are obviously still a lot of things that need to be done in terms of polish, AI and functionality before I can say that the war system is fully complete, but for the time being I am quite happy with the things that I have achieved and with how things are slowly getting there. Anyways, lads, I would like to thank you for watching and in general for your interest and the support that you have been showing me. I would also like to thank my current patron for all of the donations that they have sent me, which is really nice. Which, it's not just the money, above all, it's the feeling of having dedicated fans and, people who actually believe in you and who trust you enough to fund you. As I said earlier, many of the assets that I am currently using are either low quality things that I made myself or found on the internet for free, or are there to serve as placeholders. So through fundraising like Patreon, you may be assisting me to eventually hire or commission professionals in the future to create more professional and better looking assets. But again, as I said, it's not just about the money, above all, it's about the support. And if anyone wants to help in non-monetary ways, you can also join my Discord, as I may be occasionally looking for volunteer help. But yeah, directly contributing aside, just being there for the ride and for the sense of having a community, to give me ideas or advice, that by itself is also amazing to have. And yeah, that's about it. The game already has a Steam page, so if you haven't yet, then consider following it and wishlisting the game on Steam, as it helps a little bit with the visibility algorithm. And of course, subscribe to my channel here on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you got any questions, feel free to ask anything. I reply to just about any comment out there. And if I ever don't, it's usually because YouTube sometimes auto-deletes certain comments for whatever reason. So if such a thing has ever happened to you, know that it is YouTube, not me. I would also like to apologize a little bit for being quote-unquote a bit late on the delivery of this dev diary. Not that this is a big deal, but it's more like I feel a little bit disappointed by the fact that I gave myself two self-imposed deadlines, but I missed them. Of course, it was for a reason. I had more than a couple of IRL distractions that significantly reduced my deving output, at least for the month of January, that is. And whenever I did dev, I ended up doing things not immediately related to this specific dev diary. Plus, I had to deal with certain unexpected bugs and crashes that I absolutely had to fix. And yeah, as a result, I ended up being a little late on my delivery. But better late than never. And most of these issues are pretty much out of the way now. So, at least for the time being, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about the future of the game's development. Speaking of the future, the next dev diary will be featured or featuring things related to POPs and the economy, which are both incredibly important aspects of this game. So, if interested, make sure to stay tuned. My target for the next dev diary is March, the next month, and it is possible that in between the dev diaries I may have some smaller updates to release in between. Again, thanks for watching, and I will be seeing you on the next one. Bye!